Note, we take a short break. We'll be right back.
सस्ते वाले दाल मसाले स्वाद हुआ बेकार। MDH की हल्दी मिर्ची धनिया करे कमाल। ये रंग दे, ये खुशबू दे, ये तीखा, ये कम पड़े। क्या निराला MDH मसाला।
इसको तो फुटबॉल खेलना भी आ गया
और इससे तो पियानो बजाने भी आ गया।
चंद्रयान भी उतर गया चांद पर हमें
अब तक टेस्टी राजमा बनाना नहीं आया।
बिना MDH राजमा मसाला के टेस्टी राजमा कैसे बनेगा?
स्वादिष्ट राजमा के लिए MDH राजमा मसाला।
क्या स्वादिष्ट राजमा बनाए?
MDH
अब छोलिया हो या लोबिया, सफेद चने या काले चने,
सब कुछ मजेदार बने।
MDH।
अगर आप बनना चाहते हैं एंकर या फिर आप में है जुनून एक तेज तर्रार न्यूज रिपोर्टर बनने का, तो आप ज्वाइन करें ITV और इंडिया NewsX का मीडिया स्कूल। ITV नेक्स्ट मीडिया इंटरनेशनल स्कूल का कोर्स आपको मौका देता है देश के दिग्गज एंकर्स के साथ काम करने का। ITV नेक्स्ट मीडिया इंटरनेशनल स्कूल में आप बेहद नजदीकी से देख पाएंगे किस तरह से ITV नेटवर्क के दिग्गज पत्रकारों की टीम दिन रात खबरों पर काम करती है। इस कोर्स के दौरान आप सीखेंगे एंकरिंग की एक एक बारीकी उन एंकर्स के साथ जो देश को रखते हैं हर खबर से बाखबर। ITV नेक्स्ट मीडिया इंटरनेशनल स्कूल का ये कोर्स आपके एंकरिंग स्किल्स को करेगा इतना सशक्त मजबूत, जिससे आप बनेंगे पत्रकारिता की दुनिया का वो चमकता चेहरा जो दुनिया देखेगी और पसंद करेगी।
Welcome back. You're watching NewsX. My name is Vineet, and US President Donald Trump has given a green light for the US bill proposing 500% tariffs on buyers of the Russian oil. The proposed congressional bill could place India and China in Washington's crosshairs. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, who has said that the bill, which could be put to vote as early as next week, is well timed as Ukraine is making concessions for peace. Senator Lindsey has further added that the bill will give President Trump tremendous leverage against countries like China, India and Brazil to incentivize them to stop buying the cheap Russian oil that provides the financing for Putin's bloodbath against Ukraine. Notably, President Trump has taken a tough line on India's energy ties with Moscow. In the past, he had publicly warned India over its continued purchases of Russian oil, signaling that such trade would have consequences. Now, the questions in front of us or the US are, if the bill is passed, what impact will it have on the Indian economy and the US-India relationship as well, which has been strained, mind you, for many months. We'll talk about this with our guest. Joining us on the program to talk more about this is Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev, former diplomat. Mr. Gilbert Doctorov, Russian affairs expert. He joins us from Brussels in Belgium. Dr. Jayajit Bhattacharya, President of the CDEPR, is with us on the program as well. And last but by no means the least, Professor Madhav Nalapat, Editorial Director of the Sunday Guardian, also with us on the program. Professor Nalapat, we'll begin with you, sir. 500% is a lot of punishment. This is obviously gone beyond what India was trying to salvage. In context and in lieu of what's happening in Venezuela, what do you think is going to happen? Is Trump going to actually go ahead with this ridiculous 500%, or do you think this is just mere posturing at this time?
Well, I can tell you one thing, Vineet. In case the US Congress approves this absurd tariff on India, 500% for heaven's sake, on a country that's the world's largest democracy and which is essential to securing the Indo-Pacific. The national security doctrine of the US under President Trump 2.0 speaks of weaning Russia away from China, and instead what does the US administration do? I mean, what the U.S. president do? He threatens to he has already green-lighted the bill to have 500% tariffs on India. Normally, frankly, a bill is passed by the U.S. Congress and then given to the president for signature. Everything is topsy-turvy in the world, Donald. Frankly, Vineet, I don't think anybody but a trained psychiatrist can understand Donald Trump at this point in time, and he's created a huge amount of problems, not only for other countries, but for his own country. And of course, US manufacturers are smart. They will find some way of getting around these tariffs, but they are more than an irritant. They are a blunt threat of blackmail. They're using the weapon of tariffs to blackmail and bully countries, that is India. Well, I don't think it will succeed. In the case of India, certainly, I don't know Brazil. I don't believe any of these countries will be, will succumb to this kind of bullying. And I simply want to say that now that Trump has seized by force the oil wells of Venezuela, he wants to find a market for that. Whether the crude is heavy and light, whether the crude has got it suits the refining capacity of the country is concerned, he's not bothered about technicalities. The fact is, they're not technicalities. If the kind of crude that Venezuela has got, a very heavy crude, is not suited for most Indian refineries, it would be absolutely useless to buy that oil. So very frankly, Vineet, this man doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know whether he's coming or going. He's making as many enemies as possible in a single week. And all this is, looking very good for China, because compared to Donald Trump's America, China seems like the rock of stability. And that is a very unfortunate situation to happen. So I would only like to say, Vineet, I wish I could explain the policies of Donald Trump, but I'm not a trained psychiatrist, so I can't do it. But quite frankly, the man's policies are now seriously harming the interests of the United States itself. Thank you.
You're absolutely right, sir. And Mr. Doctorov, do you think that the way Trump has been acting, it's completely sent the global world order in a free fall? And what is Russia going to do, considering the fact that this is putting a lot of pressure economically on the Russian economy? In fact, Vladimir Putin, in a very recent interview, went on to say that if push comes to shove, if they are cornered by the Americans and the Europeans into doing this, then he sees no other option but to get into a warlike situation with the Americans and the Europeans and the rest of the world. And he said he does not want to live in a world, or he does not want a world where there is no Russia. These are some dangerous words coming out of Vladimir Putin, sir.
Well, I know that there's not a very favorable disposition in India towards China, but let's step back for a moment. I think none of this will come to pass because it all crack on the rock of China. We already saw there are two countries in the world which the United States has been unable to apply sanctions to in a damaging way. It has applied sanctions successfully to many countries. The disturbances in Iran that are going on now are certainly a result of the economic hardships coming from U.S. sanctions. The point, though, is that Russia and China are impervious to these sanctions. And the most relevant point on this 500% tariff is that they will be unenforceable on China, or the American stores will all be empty, American retailers will go bankrupt, the American economy will suffer devastation. So this is all rhetoric that cannot be realized. The Chinese won the tariff war with Mr. Trump when they said, one more move and you will have no more rare earth metals and your industry will stop dead in its tracks in about 2 weeks. Even the fools in Washington in Team Trump understood the reality of that threat and they backed off. So it will be if they try to impose a 500% tariff on China because of its Russian purchases its purchases of Russian hydrocarbons. It is unenforceable, it is utter nonsense. And what they cannot do to China, they certainly will not be able to do to Brazil and India once it's clear that the game is up. So I wouldn't worry too much sitting in Delhi that this will affect your economy. It won't. It will die in its tracks. And there is many of the other initiatives that Trump has taken since the start of the new year to utterly disrupt the world order. He has in his team some people who are utterly incomprehending of what they are getting into, not least of them being the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, claiming openly in public, we will come after you, Putin. This is insane. This is not going to end well. Unfortunately, my reading is that Mr. Trump, seeing that his popularity ratings, have been falling sharply, and seeing that this year, 2026, is an electoral year, midterm elections, he is trying desperately to raise his ratings. And he's made a pact with the devil. The devil is the CIA, the Defense Department, War Department, and the State Department. These are collections of neocons, of American hegemony fans who have taken over U.S. policy and left Mr. Trump as a talking head, as the mouthpiece. The decisions are being made in the CIA, as we know from what happened in Caracas. That is a disaster for the U.S. policy and for the world order.
All right. I understand what you're saying, sir, and where you're coming from. Ambassador Sachdev, Donald Trump and the way he's, prioritizing everything American and putting, the world order, or as the world as we know it, on the back burner. What is it doing, and what are the implications that this is going to have, especially on the Indian economy, the way India deals with the Americans, and the way India deals with Russia more so?
Thank you. Glad to be on your channel again. I think this threat of 500% is possible but not probable. It empowers the president to go up to 500%, I reckon, but it's unlikely to be put to that kind of effect. I think it is to pressurize Mr. Putin, firstly, into agreeing to the revised Ukraine-US formulation for a peace deal. And it is hoped that the threat of 500% would concentrate minds in Moscow. It may or it may not. And in any case, I think by raising this in public and saying that publicly that this is supposed to punish people, this has become a counterproductive strategy. To quote, I think, Roosevelt, instead of carrying a big stick in the back and saying nice doggy, it's other way around being said, bad doggy, and there's no big stick. So I would find it rather implausible to have this kind of threat being bandied. As other panelists have also said, 500% tariff means practically no trade. And US is the world's largest market. Its consumers depend on imports from China, from Brazil, and from India in a major way. And shop windows, mall shelves are all going to be empty or are going to be 600 times priced. 600% time priced, which is an absurdity. As it is, President Trump is trying to play down the inflation, but by giving subsidies and direct banking transfer to consumers, I think he he might have two other motives. Firstly, right now he has a majority in both houses of the Congress. Come November, he is worried that he may lose the majority in one or both houses, and he has already talked yesterday about being impeached. Secondly, I think it's only this time that he can have this kind of bill passed. If he's going to lose majority, I think the voters' mood is going to leave further if he continues to pile on tariffs on consumers. Essentially, it will have to be paid by the US consumers. I have a feeling that this is all posturing, and this would, as it is, China, India, and Brazil, members of BRICS, a body that he wants to disband as anti-American. I suppose this would be counterproductive. The three countries would band up further closer to Russia. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Bhattacharya, it's important to understand that, and taking a leaf out of what Ambassador Sajdev also said, that it is probable but not possible. You know, there were a lot of things that Trump said which the world considered probable, but they were converted to possible. Perhaps he went a step further than that. And we've seen that with Venezuela as well. And we've seen that with the 66 international forums that he's pulled out of. What are we in for at this point in time?
Yeah, Vineet, I completely agree with you. In fact, let's look at the context. US, with almost a $30 trillion economy, grew at 4.2%. Its inflation rate has been at one of the lowest in recent history. So on paper, the policies of the current US administration seems to be paying off. Now, there may be a mismatch between what the Americans on the ground are feeling versus what the inflation rate is and what the real GDP growth rates are. But I would not go into the details of that. The outcome essentially is that on paper, the policy seems to be paying off. Now, and therefore, what really does stop the president of US and the US administration to take forward a proposal that they have conceived? Going by past record, and many of them you just mentioned, the administration has taken forward whatever they have said that they will take forward. So there hasn't been much of a posturing. They said something and they went ahead and did it. And we are also living in a world of post rationality in geopolitics. What the US administration has brought in is an extension of domestic politics to the rest of the world. So if the domestic political scenario is where their base is clapping and cheering all the steps being taken, then there is enough reason and rationale for the US administration to take forward that the aspirations of that base to the larger geopolitical arena, and that's really what's playing out. If you look at energy and oil, to be more specific in this particular case, Russian oil has been instrumental in keeping the global oil prices low. If we take away the Russian oil, which will happen if there is a 500% tariff on India's purchase of Russian oil, and therefore India's, the other way around, India's exports to US, and therefore if India stops purchasing Russian oil, then the oil prices will go up very, very significantly. If the US administration somehow believes that that can be compensated by Venezuelan oil flowing in, that's not going to happen very soon. It's going to take a significant amount of time for the Venezuelan oil to start flowing in to compensate for the loss of Russian oil. And we must keep in mind that a lot of the Russian oil post-refining actually ends up in US. and therefore the US actually directly benefits from this particular flow. And there was an understanding between the US administration and the Indian administration that India must continue to buy the Russian oil in order to keep the prices low. Also, we must keep in mind that India has been buying this oil at the price, at the lower price that was set up by the European powers, and therefore the global rules were being followed. Russian oil has never been sanctioned, and therefore what is really playing out is what the other panelists also mentioned, is that as and when this act becomes a reality, it'll be at the end of the day the American public will be paying for it, because the regular goods will become more expensive, because anything that they're procuring from India, including pharmaceuticals, which was excluded from any tariff till now, will come under the 500% tariff, which therefore means medicines will become that much more expensive. India is a key supplier of pharmaceuticals to US. In fact, export of barytes, which is very critical for oil drilling in US, and India is one of the biggest exporter of barytes to US, and there was no tariff on the Indian export of barytes. That will now have 500% tariff. So the US oil industry will now have to pay 5 times the price for getting the barytes, without which they can't do any of the oil drilling. And the consumers will find food, they'll find clothing, the basic necessities to be that much more expensive, because if India steps out of supplying this, it's not that every other country in the world can substitute what India can provide. And hence, it will be the US consumers who will end up paying for all of these tariff measures. So in a way, it's an indirect taxation on the US public. What is the impact on India? Well, if India succumbs to this kind of pressure, then obviously India loses what has been touted as strategic autonomy. So I believe in the existing policy framework that India has, probably India will continue to follow its strategic autonomy. We also need to keep in mind that over $1.2 billion worth of uranium is also being imported by the US from Russia. So this bill talks about putting 500% tariff on every country that is importing oil and uranium, which means that the US government is going to put a 500% tariff on what it is importing from Russia in the form of uranium. So it's pretty strange as to how that will play out. Are they putting a sanction on themselves because they are importing from uranium from Russia? And again, substituting these critical inputs is not very easy. It's not very easy to take away $1.2 billion of uranium imports from Russia and source it from elsewhere. So it's going to open up a Pandora's box in terms of global trade, in terms of what global rules are and how countries work with each other. Obviously, it is a big WTO issue, but as Professor Nalapat said, who cares about WTO anymore? The US administration will move forward irrespective of everything that we just mentioned on the table here.
Fair enough, sir. Well, you've made some valid point. We've appreciated everything that's been shared on this platform, but we have run out of time. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're going to get into a very short break at this point in time. We'll be right back.